Hello, everybody. We're starting to get everybody in. Okay, so far so good. Let's see, a couple more people. Somebody want to text me to let me know that you can hear me, or send me a chat. Somebody send me a chat. Thank you. Let's make sure everything's going good. We had a couple people who my stuff went into their junk mail today, and that's because I was sending out the YouTube videos. Sometimes your spam filters kind of recognize those YouTube videos as junk mail. So make sure if you don't see me that you let everybody. If you don't see my invitation, that you text me. We'll go over that in just a second. Again, I want to tell people if they want to sign out. You're gonna let my wife know that you want to sign out, and she has to go to the Old Bridge office in order to sign you out. The computer there is the one that's registered with the Real Estate Commission on this. So if you want to sign out, you're going to let her know. Tuesdays is the day that she goes into the office. So if you're going to sign out on let her know before Tuesday that you're heading there, or that you want to sign out. And if you happen to need a other day to get signed out, we're happy to do that. We'll just make special arrangements and make an appointment. I'm muting everybody again. We have a big, long class tonight. I put together a lot of stuff because we kind of got shortchanged a little bit last night. So I did put together a bigger, more aggressive class tonight. That's going to take us a little bit longer. So we want to get started, and we want to minimize the disruptions as much as we can. The class, we'll talk about Thursday's class in a minute. They changed the time for our board meeting yearly dinner because of the new lockdown requirements that Governor Murphy is pushing, because even Governor Murphy is going into quarantine. So they changed our time on our dinner. I've got to see how that affects us for tomorrow night and timing for a extra class for tomorrow night. I'll know probably by tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So, that's when I'll be sending out any invitations for tomorrow's class. And a couple of people have asked for some specific help on specific things. Always happy to do that. And, we're going to try to run some extra classes this week anyway, because we want to get you guys finished up so you can get licensed and get out there making some money in real estate. Still good statistics showing in New Jersey. So there's still an opportunity to make money. So far, you haven't missed anything. I've just been talking in order to kill a few minutes to let everybody get in here. Okay, so again, I did get some texts from people tonight, and I just want to remind you that if for some reason on a regular class night you don't see your invitation, as we're getting near class time, I try to send them out first thing in the morning. If you don't see your invitation, just text me or text 732-266-3366, and then we will make sure that you guys have the opportunity. I'll send out the invitation again or send it out special. Make sure you check your junk mail. Again, stuff has been going into the junk mail. All right, I still have people signing in, so I'm going to just kill another minute before we get going here tonight. We have some math because you guys asked for some math. You've asked for a couple other things, so let's get going tonight. First is a couple of math things. And this should say the value of a home. So this is not the volume, but the value of a home is $91,000 today. What was the original cost if the property has lost 35% of its value? So our value is $91,000 today, and originally it was worth more. Sign out forms, again, we will email them to you if you want them. Just text it to 732-266-3366. So the sign out forms, if you want one, text it or email it to, or request them if you don't have one already, to 732-266-3366. All right, so again, The value of a home is $91,000 today. What was the original cost if the property has lost 35% of its value? So what we're looking for was what was the house worth before it lost 35% of its value. Now today, you know, prices are going up, but back in 2008, prices did go down 35%. So it's very important that we, you know, kind of calculate what happens. So let's see if we have any answers yet. Okay. So if what I'm going to do here right now is I'm going to do this backwards. And again, I'm jumping around here a little because people are still showing up. So I'm going to do this backwards, and I'm going to take each of the answers, and we're going to eliminate some answers right away. So it's worth 91,000 today. We're asking what it was original worth before it lost 35% of its value. We can cross out number one right away because we know that number one is less. It didn't go up in value, it went down. So we know we could cross out one right away. Now let's look at, let's take these other numbers and let's take away 35% and see what we get. So if you take 95,789, 95,789,000.47, and you take away 35%, by the way, if we're taking away 35%, what we're really doing is we're really going to multiply by the inverse of that by 0.65. Okay, so if we had a property that was worth 95,789 and now it's only worth 65% of its value because it lost 35%, well, that's not the answer. So 95,000 is not the answer. Now let's go to 122,850. So 122,850. And let's multiply that times 0.65. Again, why 0.65? Because it's the inverse of what it went down in value, which is 0.35. And 122,850 now times 0.65. That's going to give us $79,852 as its that's what it would have been if it would have lost 35% of its value. But we know it's worth 91,000. So we know it's got to be a number higher than that. So let's take 140,000 and multiply that times 0.65, and that's going to give you 91,000. So 140,000 times 0.65, that's going to give you the 91,000 that it's worth today. So it was originally worth 140. It lost 35% of its value. So we had to take away 35%, and we do that by just multiplying by the inverse, which is 0.65, and that gives us the 91,000. Okay, that's the way I would do it if you're not real good with math and you don't know how to set yourself up a little equation to do this. Let's see if some people got this right, by the way. So we did got it. Yep. So it's 91,000 divided by 1.35. And that's going to give us our, 91,000 times 1.35 gives us 140,000. 91,000 times 1.35. Or, Gary, you're right, 91,000 divided by 0.65. So either way of those two ways is a method for solving that. You notice I'm doing math first tonight so that I don't get them all wrong as I get tired. Got 5 more people entering the room, so bear with me 1 second.
Bruce, the answer should not be number 3.
Well,
yeah, correct. Because as per the calculation, like should be number 3.
So if it was originally worth 122,650, let's go back here and do this again. If it was originally worth 122,850 and it lost 35% of its value, so let's go 122,850 times 0.35. That means we would be taking away 42,997. And if we took away 122,850 and we subtracted 35% of its value, that would be 42,997. And that would give us a number of, this would give us 79,853. And that's not enough. Again, if we take And bear with me a second, a few more people are showing up. If we take 140,000 and we multiply that times the 35%, what 35% is, so 140,000 times 0.35, that gives us 49,000 is what it lost. And if it lost 49,000, 140,000 minus 49,000 is again going to give us our 91,000.
Yeah, ये कर लेना.
Okay.
100 multiplied by 20.
Sounds good, Bruce.
Okay, good.
Yes.
What's the price per front foot for a 100 by 100 lot that sold for 125,000? Now, when we talk about lots, the first dimension is always what we call the front foot. And so this lot is 100 by 100. We don't really need to know the area, because if we multiplied 100 by 100, that would give us an area. We don't really need to know that, because they're asking us how much did it sell per front foot. And so we're going to take 125,000, and it sold for $100. It had 100 front feet, dollars, and this is feet. And so our answer is 125 divided by 100, and that's going to give us 125,000 divided by 100. That's going to give us 1,250, and the units are going to be, because it's dollars per foot, the units are going to be dollars per foot, and that's what we're looking for. What's the price per front foot? It's $1,250 per front foot. Okay, we didn't really need to know the area on this, because we weren't doing a calculation in involved area. We were just looking at front feet. And the reason I say that is, let's go to the next question. What is the price per square foot of a lot that was 100 by 100 and sold for 125? So now we have to find out the area. And what's the area? 100 times 100. Okay, so do 100 times 100 on your calculator, and you're going to get what number? 10,000.
10,000.
Okay, so we got 10,000, and our unit here is square feet. We have, because this is feet and this is feet, so our unit is square feet. We have 10,000 square feet, so we have 10,000 square feet, and we paid 125. Let's write it over here. 125,000 for it, divided by 10,000, and that's going to give us our price per square foot. So 125,000 divided by 10,000. That's going to give us $12.50, which is that correct? What do we got? 100 by 100 is 10,000, and we have 125,000 divided by 10. I'm sorry, $12.50. So it's not even up there. So the answer is $12.50. The answer is $12.50 per square foot. $125,000 divided by 10,000 square feet. The answer should be $12.50. Okay. So even they make mistakes on their tests here. All right, now let's make it a little more complicated. A little more complicated is same lot, how much is it per acre? The same lot, how much is it per acre? Now you're going to have to remember how much an acre is in square feet for the test. Sometimes the question just is, how many square feet is an acre? And remember, the guy in class dreamed up a way to remember it, and he said 711 is a way to remember it. So we have 43, that's the 7,560, 43,560 square feet in an acre. All right, and what do we have here? We have 10,000 square feet. So how much of an acre is that? If we have 10,000 square feet, it looks like we have about a quarter of an acre, right? 43,000 square feet in an acre, and we have 10,000 square feet. That looks like a quarter of an acre, okay? And it's sold for $125,000 for a quarter of an acre. And you figure it would be somewhere around 4 times that much for a full acre. So we know we can eliminate this, and this just by looking at it. So now, if we look at how much of an acre we have 43,560 divided by 10,000. And how much of an acre do we have? 43,560 divided by 10,000. So we have 43,560, I'm sorry, we have 10,000 square feet. Sorry about that. We have 10,000 square feet, and we're going to divide that by 43,560. That's how much of an acre we have. We have about a quarter of an acre, right? So we're going to do 10,000 divided by 43,560, and that's going to give us 0.229, and I'm going to round off the next decimal place, 6. We have 0.2296 of an acre. And we said it was about a quarter of an acre. A quarter of an acre would have been 0.25. Okay, so we have a quarter of an acre that we paid $125,000 for. And how much would a whole acre be? So if we're going to pay $125,000 for a quarter of, for 0.2296 of an acre, so now we have to divide 125,000 divided by 0.2296, and that's going to give us 544,425. So again, we're going to divide 125,000. So that's the dollars, because we're looking for dollars per acre. That's the dollars, and then per acre, what do we have per acre is 0.2296, and so what would a whole acre cost? Because they're asking how much is it per acre. We know it's about 4 times as much as this because we have about a quarter of a lot. And so we have 544,000. I can't even read my own handwriting. So 123 divided by 0.2296 gives us 544,425 an acre. Gives us 544,425 an acre. Now, the exercise here that we're doing is just to show you, a little bit of common sense can help. Because if we had a little bit of common sense here, we saw that we had 10,000 square feet and an acre is 43,000 square feet. We know we have a little bit less than a quarter of an acre. When we do the math, we see it's a little less than a quarter of an acre. So we know that these 3 answers can't be correct. And again, that gives you an opportunity. If you can't do the math, at least you can just pick this answer, because the other ones are in the realm of impossibility, so to speak. Okay. All right, I'm going to go a little slower on this one so you have a chance to do it. What is the interest rate on a $10,000 loan that requires semi-annual interest payment of $450? So twice a year, you're going to make a payment of $450 on a $10,000 loan. What's your interest rate? And remember, we talked, sorry about that. We talked about our magic circle here where we put earnings up here and we put principal times rate down here. And this is a divide sign in here. And so anything we want to find, we cover up with our finger. We're looking for the rate, so we would cover the rate up with our finger. What's left tells us what to do. It tells us to do earnings divided by principal. But here's the key here. This is semi-annual, and remember, interest rates are by the year. It's so much per year. So we have to convert this 450 to by the year. So our earnings are going to be 900. and our principal is 10,000. So 900 divided by 10,000 is going to be our answer. So now we're just going to look at what's 900 divided by 10,000. And that's 9% interest. That comes out to 0.09, which is 9% interest. Okay, any questions? These are straight off of a test, by the way. So again, okay, can you repeat it, please? Let's do it again. These are straight off of a test. So we're actually benefiting from information that people have gotten me from a test. Okay. So we have our magic circle, I like to call it. And this tells us what to do with these kind of problems. And we put E up the top. That's for earnings. Then we put a line across here and we put a division sign here. And then we have P and R here. P is for principal, R is for rate. And the magic circle that we have, whatever we're trying to find, we would put our finger over and then do what it tells us to do. So we are looking to find the rate. We're looking to find the rate. So if we were to put our finger over rate and cover rate, what's left tells us what to do, and it's telling us to divide earnings divided by principal. That's what it's telling us right here, earnings divided by principal. Now the trick to this, and the hard part of this, is our earnings are $450 twice a year. And interest rates are expressed as an interest rate per year. So we have 450 times 2 is our earnings. So we know this part of the equation is 900, 450 times 2. And then the P for principal is this $10,000 loan. That's down here in the denominator, 10,000. And if we do 900, divided by 10,000, it gives us an interest rate of, this comes out to 0.09. And what is 0.09? 0.09 is the same thing as 9%. So our interest rate is 9%. Well, so the question is, how do I know what's the earnings? Well, what is interest? If you're having interest are earnings. The rate is the interest rate that you're paying on a loan. The $10,000 is the principal on the loan. So when we're talking about loans, the principal is the amount you borrowed. The interest rate is the interest rate you're being charged for the loan. And the earnings are the amount of money that the lender earns by making you that loan, the amount of return they make on their investment by lending you the money. Okay, let's try another one. Now we're going to do it a little bit more complicated, but not really any harder. We're going to calculate eight months interest on a $5,000 interest-only loan at 9.5%. Okay, so 8 months interest we have to figure out now. And again, remember, interest rates are expressed as a rate per year. And we have $5,000. We're going to draw a magic circle again. So earnings, and then we're going to put a divide sign in here, and then is principal times rate down here. This is P times R down here. All right, this is our magic thing. So we're looking to calculate earnings again, 8 months interest earnings. So we're going to cover up earnings, and we're going to say that we have principal times rate gives us our earnings. But again, it's principal times interest rate per year, because it's assumed when you say interest rate, you're talking about a year. So it's the principal times the interest rate per year. So we're going to say $5,000 times 9.5% per year. And we're going to multiply that out, and that'll tell us what a year's interest is. $5,000 $5,000 times 0.095, because that's how you write 9.5%, 0.095. That's how you write 9.5%. So 5,000 times 0.095 is going to give us $475. Again, 5,000 times 0.0 is going to give us $475. But that's earnings, that's $475 a year. So we have to divide that, and there's a couple ways you can do this, but I'm going to divide it by 12 because that tells us how much per month interest, and then multiply that number by 8 because they want to know 8 months interest. So if I take the 475 and I divide it by 12, that's how much interest there is a month. That's $39.58333. So 39.58333. And then I'm going to multiply that times 8 because they want to know 8 months. And that's going to give us 316.66. Okay. A couple more people checking in.
I'm sorry, can you tell me why 475 was divided by 2?
Okay, we'll do it again. Yes, I will. And Sue, you're late. That means you have to do safer detention tonight.
Okay, what do you say for detention?
All right, hang on a second. So again, we're going to draw our magic thing. Oops.
It wasn't divided by 2, it was divided by 12 because it's asking for 8 months.
Well, let's kind of, and that's the right, you're right, but let's do it slowly again. So we're going to start out with our magic circle again, and up here is the earnings, and down here is the principal and the rate, and we put a divided sign here, and we put a multiplication sign here, and whatever we're looking for, we put our finger over, so to speak, and we do what's left in the little circle. So they're looking for the earnings. You know, they're looking for the 8 months worth of interest. That's the earnings. They're telling you the rate, 9.5%, and you know it's assumed it's per year. But the earnings, what we have to calculate what the earnings are. So if we want to calculate what the earnings are, we put our finger over earnings, and whatever left is what we do. So it's telling us to do principal times rate. The $5,000 is the principal. That's the amount of money you borrowed. That's the principal. So we're going to say $5,000, and we're going to multiply that times 9.5% a year. Interest rates are by the year. How do we write 9.5%? It's 0.095. So $5,000 times 0.095. And that's going to give us how much interest we get in a year. Because remember, this was dollars and this was per year. So when we multiply them together, our units are dollars per year, right? That's our units. Because we have dollars in the numerator and year in the denominator here. So our unit is going to be dollars per year. And so what we're saying here is $5,000 times 0.095. That's going to give us $475 per year. Now they only want to know 8 months. So now we just got to do a simple calculation. We figure out how much per month. So we're going to take 475 per year and divide it by 12 months per year. Now look what happens here. This crosses out and this crosses out, and it equals your earnings per month. So 475 divided by 12, it's telling us 475 divided by 12, it's telling us that per month, our earnings, I'm running out of space here, our earnings are going to be $39 and 5, 8, and then we actually have some trailing decimals here, but it's not a big deal. That's how much we're going to get paid per month in interest, in earnings. And then we know it's for 8 months, so we want to multiply that times 8 to get how much it is for just 8 months, because that's the question, times 8. And that gives us $316.66. Okay. Ahmed, you're still not with us? I'd be happy to do it over again.
Yeah, so only thing is like I just like this is the first time I can say my first class session. So that's the thing I just need to understand.
So
Like
let's do it again.
elements. No. I just need to understand like a few things because I just need like during the dry run right now. So the interest part is considered as a principal. The percentage part is considered as a rate.
No.
And the number of-
So on all of these things, we these type of problem, we have earnings, principal, and rate. So
Yeah.
Earnings is equal to how much money the bank gets in interest. That's what earnings is. How much
Okay.
money the bank gets in interest. Because the bank earns money by lending you money. How much earnings the bank gets in interest. The principal is equal to how much you borrowed.
Correct.
And the rate is equal to the interest rate that the bank is charging you. The interest rate that the bank is charging you. Okay, so when the bank lends you money, they want to make a profit by lending you money, and so they charge you an interest rate on the principal. Whatever the principal is, they charge you an interest rate, and then that's their earnings. Okay, and this is just a simple little tool, with this being a divide sign, this being a multiplication sign, and whatever you want to find, you put your finger over it. So if we had just the earnings and the rate, and we wanted to find the principal, we would put our finger over principal, and it would tell us to do earnings divided by rate. Okay? And again, we'll do more of these. This isn't the only one we'll do.
No, yeah, just simply need to get like say the glimpse of it, like try to understand like say the value we need to put in like for the earning and for the principal and for the rate. That's the only thing I just need to
what each of the different variables are. I understand.
That's the only thing I just need to understand.
Earnings is equal to $5,000. No, it's not. The principal is the $5,000. This is from someone else. Earnings is not the $5,000. They're asking us to calculate the earnings. They're asking us to calculate the earnings, right? They're asking us to calculate the interest. The interest paid is the earnings. This is the amount you borrowed. The $5,000 is the principal. It's a $5,000 loan. It's the principal. That's the principal. And then the bank makes a return on that loan, the money that they lent you.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
Okay.
I get it.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bruce. I'm sorry because I'm hearing what you're saying, but it's not connecting just yet.
Okay, let's do it again.
Okay, yeah, do it. The 8 months is how long we want it, but that's the interest on 5,000.
So this is like a sneaky question, and the reason it's sneaky is they're asking you for 8 months of interest instead of a year's interest. So when they express an interest rate on a loan, like if you get a home mortgage, right, and they're expressing the interest rate on your home mortgage, if they're expressing the interest rate on your home mortgage, let's say you're borrowing $100,000 to buy a house, and they tell you that the interest rate is 3%. What that 3% means is 3% per year. So the $100,000 that you're borrowing to buy your house, that's the principal. The 3% per year is the interest rate. And the earnings is how much interest you would pay the bank over a year. And so this is it. That's why I chose this numbers here, because they're easy to do. If you had a loan of $100,000, if you had a loan of $100,000 and you were paying 3% per year, the amount of interest the bank would earn on you would be, again, let's draw our magic thing, earnings, principal, and rate. So we're looking for the amount of earnings the bank would get. That's principal times rate. So if we did 100,000, and how do we write 3%? Times 0.03.
3. Okay.
Right? So
Right.
100,000 times 0.03 is $3,000 per year is what
Right.
the bank would earn in interest. That would be their earnings. That's equal to their earnings. The 100,000 is equal to the principal, and the 3% a year is equal to the rate.
Okay. I got you now.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes,
He's
sir.
on page number 477.
Okay. Yeah, it is. Now, why is this important to pass the test? Well, first, it's important to pass the test. Second of all, there are times when you are doing this kind of math in your head to see what your buyer is going to have to pay, right? Because an interest rate determines how much you're going to have to pay on your mortgage every month. If interest rates go up, like if you have an adjustable rate loan and interest rates go up, you're going to pay more every month. And so this is the way that you can calculate, one of the ways you calculate what the amount of your payments are potentially going to be. But just remember, and again, I'm oversimplifying this, because typically your mortgage payments are going to be the principal that you pay back, right? Again, if you're borrowing $100,000 for a loan, that's your principal. But every month you might be paying off some of that principal. If you have a fully amortized loan, you might be paying off $1,000 a month in principal. We're talking about your PITI. Let me get rid of that because I don't want to confuse you. And your mortgage payment, your I is going to be your interest, and the interest is determined by the 100,000 times whatever the interest rate is. Okay, and then of course you have your taxes and insurance. The T is for your property taxes, and the I is for your property insurance, and that's your monthly payment is on your loan. So there's times when we have to figure out how much the interest payment is going to be on your loan. How much is that I going to be? And they're going to give us another question on this later on, or we'll go over it anyway. I don't think I have it on this deck of slides. There's sometimes we have to calculate what a payment is going to be using an amortization table. And then sometimes on the test, they have you back off from that information to figure out how much of it is interest and how much is principal. But we're not going to confuse you now with that. Okay, this is a very common question on the test. A gift shop pays $600 a month plus 2.5% of its gross annual sales in excess of $50,000, right? And from the chapter on leases, this is called a percentage lease. You're paying a flat fee plus you're paying part of your sales. And you don't have to pay that 2.5% until you go over $50,000. That's what the question's saying. We have to go over $50,000 before we have to share some of our sales with our landlord at the rate of 2.5%. So if your annual sales were $75,000, remember on the first $50,000, you're not paying anything on this 2.5%, right? Because it says over 50,000. But then on the next 25,000, you're going to pay 2.5%. So that's times 0.025. So that's 25,000 times 0.025. And that's going to be equal to $625. This is over the course of the year because it's telling you that your annual sales were $75,000. So you paid $625 over the course of the year as part of this 2.5% over $50,000, right? But you also paid $600 a month. So if we take the $600 a month, so 600 times 12, that's going to give us $7,200. So the total you paid to your landlord over the year is the $625 plus $7,200. So 625 plus 7,200. That's equal to 7,825. That's how much you paid the landlord over the course of the year. And they're asking you, what was the average monthly rent? And we just divide by 12 to get that average monthly rent. We're going to divide by 12. And that's going to give us 652.08. This is a very common question on the test. And I have to admit somebody, so I can't clear this for a second in order to admit them. Where did she go? Okay, I guess she got tired of waiting. Sorry about that. Okay, hopefully she'll try to log back on. Yes, it's being recorded. Yes. You don't necessarily get to use your phones in the center. You use the calculator that's built into the computer. They usually won't take your phones. And we want to do this question one more time. So again, this is what's called a percentage lease. This is called a percentage lease. This is the kind of lease that people usually have. The smaller stores in a mall typically have percentage leases. And yeah, in our book, we have a slightly different magic formula. You're welcome to use any one you can find, but they both are the same thing. They're just giving synonyms for all the terms, so to speak. Yeah, magic. So again, we have a percentage lease, and the gift shop is paying $600 per month for rent. Plus, the landlord wants to share in her success when she sells stuff. I'm going to have to click out so I can let her in again, because otherwise I can't let her in. Let's let her in and I'll start all over again. There we go. Got her. So I'm so sorry it took a minute to let you in. I had to clear out all of my drawings in order to do that, so it just took a minute. Sorry about that. So let's go over again.
Okay.
We have $600 a month times 12 months. So that means our monthly rate is $7,200 per year. And then we have to pay this penalty or royalty or premium, whatever you want to call it. We have to pay 2.5% of sales over 50,000. So the first 50,000 we make, we don't have to pay any royalty. The next money, any money over that, we have to pay a royalty. So we have $75,000. That means the first 50,000 we don't have to pay. That leaves us 25,000 we have to pay on. So we also are going to have to pay 25,000 times 2.5%, and we write that as 0.025. So that 25,000 times 0.025 is $625. So our total that we paid over the course of the year was $625 plus 72. This is the total we paid over the course of the year. So let's add those two together. That means the total we paid over the year was $78.25. That's how much we paid for rent over the whole year. And it's asking us, what was the average monthly rent? So how much did it end up costing us per month? So we're going to take the $78.25 that it cost us per year, and we're going to divide it by 12 months per year. And what that's going to give us is $652.08. It's going to give us this answer.
I'm sorry, Bruce. I'm just trying to get on the meeting. You don't have to close out or anything. I'm just going to my phone. To my computer.
Just give me a second and we'll get you right in.
Okay.
And I am recording this, and I will send it out, and it won't go out till sometime tomorrow because this is going to be a long class. It's going to take a while to process. All right. Let's see what the chats say here. Okay. Let's do a next one. And I don't know if we can see this. Let's see what I can do to. The commission was 6.5%, and the commission check. So we have a 6.5% commission, and we have the commission check was for $5,200. What did the house sell for? And so we're going to kind of use our magic thing again, and we're going to say earnings, price, rate. All right, put the divided sign there and the times sign there. So we're looking for what price the house sold at, the P. All right, and so what it's telling us to do is earnings divided by rate. And what were our earnings? $5,200. That was our commission, $5,200. And we're going to divide that by 6.5%, 0.065. And if we do that, if we do 5,200 divided by 0.065, we come out with $80,000. Now, I always suggest that if you get an answer, you do it backwards. You take your $80,000. Okay, what we want to do, if we're going to do it backwards, what we're taking the $80,000 here, if we're going to do it backwards, right? Earning $80,000 if we're going to do it backwards. So we're going to just plug in all our numbers. We're going to plug in our price down here of 80,000. We're going to plug in our price down here of 80,000, and we're going to plug in our rate of 0.065, and we can't see that up here because I spaced it incorrectly. And then we're going to make sure our earnings up here are 5,200. And as long as all that works out, the math all works out, we're fine. So if we take 80,000 and we multiply it times 0.065, it's going to give us 5,200. So this times this is going to give us 5,200. So we can back check our answers. Now you could even do this whole problem backwards. You can take each of these numbers. You could take 80,400. That's the principal. That's the price of the house. And you can multiply it by 0.065. Okay, it's going to give you a little bit more than 5,200. Let's do that just to feel it. 80,400 times 0.065. That's going to give us a little more. It's going to give us 5226. So we know that this number is too high because it's giving us too much. So if we know that this number is too high, now we also know that this number is too high because it's even higher. So we can cross out these two, and then we're left with 80,000 or 77.2. Let's do the 77.2, 77,200 times 0.065. Let's see what that gives us. 77,200 times 0.065. That's going to give us 5018. Well, we know that's not enough because we're looking for 5,200. So now what we know is our answer's got to be 80,000 without even doing the math. But let's do the math, and let's say 80,000 times 0.065. And that, let's do it on your calculators or your phones so you feel it. 80,000 times 0.065, and that's going to give us 5,200. And that's what we're looking for, 5,200. Yeah, I understand. Everybody does stuff other ways, Nancy, and you just got to do what's best for you because the goal is to pass the test. Let's see, we got a question here. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Oh, that's the last math question for tonight. So I am going to, this is being recorded. I will send you all this stuff. Yes, the test does have multiple choice on the math. So that's a very good question. And on the gift shop question, I'll tell you what the answer was if I don't have to do all the math again. Where the heck is that one?
65208.
65208 is the answer on this one. 65208, it's 4. And again, this is all being recorded. I'll send them out. You guys can watch this and go back and forth, go over and over them on YouTube. All right, so we said we were going to do land description. I'm going to do that one. It's an easy chapter.
Bruce,
Yes.
this 10 to 12, Bruce, this 10 to 12 math question that covers the whole math section of the entire book.
I'm sorry, say
I
that
mean, if
again.
you do this 10 to 12 question we just shared with us, right? Does that cover the entire math portion of the exam?
That's not from your math book. It's from another. Textbook. There's questions, math questions in our math book. But I tried to pick out.
What I'm asking, if we just practice these 12 questions, is that going to be enough for us to pass the exam, the math section?
So there is no. So the answer to that is I'm going to answer that in a good way and a bad way. There is no math section. People are telling me sometimes there's 4 math questions, sometimes there's 6. I tell people you can pass this test and get all the math questions wrong, but it's a multiple choice quiz test. So you should get at least one of the math questions right if you just guess on them all, right? So don't be too concerned that you won't get the math right. But the math questions we just did, they are about a representative sample of what you're going to have on the test. You're going to have an area question. You're going to have an interest question. You're going to have a what's the price of the house question if we have the rate of commission and the amount of commission paid. You may have a question about prorating taxes on a closing statement like we did last night. Those are a little bit harder. But the good things about those questions is if you have a proration question on a closing statement, they always have what's a debit and what's a credit as part of the answer. So you can usually eliminate 2 or 3 of the answers by just knowing what's a debit and what's a credit. And you don't even maybe have to do math. It reminds me of when I was like in 3rd grade and they gave you a math test and they put all these numbers in a string you had to multiply together, and hidden in that string was the number 0. And as soon as you saw the 0 in there, you knew that the answer was 0 because everything times 0 is 0. And so with math, with numbers being, with multiplication being both associative and distributive, it didn't matter what order the stuff was in. And so therefore, if there was a 0 in the string, the whole thing was 0. And what I'm telling you is sometimes there's hints in the questions that you might not even have to do the math if you just know what the concept is. But you're probably going to have a loan to value question and a front end and a back end question. PITI divided by income, or PITI plus debt divided by income, and loan to value ratio is equal to the loan amount divided by the sales price or appraised value, whichever is higher. And again, some of those questions you can almost figure out the answer just by 2 things. You can almost figure out the answer by the concept because it may tell you like what direction the number should be in. But the other thing is all of the numbers on the real test are going to be real numbers. So they always come out even. If you do a math problem on the test and you have a remainder, you did something wrong because they never, or almost, they're always exact. They're really good on how they do the questions. And the other thing is they're all in the realm of reality. So if you come up with a house that's $300,000 and your interest payment is $30 a month, you're not in the realm of reality. And if it's $30,000 a month, you're not in the realm of reality. So again, all the questions are in the realm of reality. So sometimes just by test taking techniques, you can whittle down some of the answers. And then if there's 6 questions and you can whittle them all down to just 2 answers, now odds are you're going to get 3 of them right. It's better to get them all right. It's better to do the math. And we'll do more math as we go along. Tonight's not the only night we're going to do math. Again, the math is hard on you guys. I know it's not easy. Okay, we're getting to 7 and 8 tonight. First, land description. This is an easy one. George Washington was a surveyor. What he's using there is a level and a transit. Those are the same tools that we've used all the way up till today. Today, some modern technology is replacing this stuff. But in terms of the test, we're going to talk about a level and a transit. Where he's looking through on this device is a plate that's marked off with 360 degrees, and he's measuring and recording land, the perimeter of land. going around the perimeter of land with distance and direction. And that's called a meets and bounds definition of your property. Distance and direction, meets and bounds. Okay. Now, he also had to measure distance. Back in the olden days, they measured distance with a thing called a chain. They actually had a chain with links on it that was 66 feet long, and they would survey thousands of miles, 66 feet at a time. You know, just think of all the work involved. So we have now a meets and bounds description. When you look at a meets and bounds description, you can tell it's a meets and bounds description because it starts out with the words beginning at a point, and then that you end up at this, you go all the way around in a clockwise direction, and you end at the same point, so you have a point of ending. You have things called monuments. A monument can be a natural thing, so you're describing your way around the perimeter of this property using distance and direction. But when you get here, there's a big tree. The big tree is a monument. Or maybe when you get here, there's a fence. The fence is a monument because a monument can be man-made or it can be natural. Sometimes you'll also find benchmarks. Benchmarks are something that the surveyors put in as a representative point that everybody knows exactly where it is. So when they begin their survey, they can find that benchmark and they can see where they are, so they can cite off the benchmark to cite their way around the property. I have a benchmark right in front of my office at Highland Park that's been there for over 100 years. And many times I'll see surveyors out there citing off that benchmark because it helps tell them exactly where they are. And since we used to do surveys with really antiquated and obsolete tools like a level in a transit, there's many errors. There's many errors in this kind of property description. And we're starting to use new tools to do them now. We're geocoding things. But we still, in New Jersey, we still call our meets and bounds description of a property, we call our meets and bounds description of a property the legal description. And the reason we call it the legal description is because when you go to record a deed with the county clerk, it has to be accompanied with a meets and bounds description. And when you record a mortgage, it has to be accompanied with a meets and bounds description of the property that you're mortgaging, okay? And that's why it's called a legal description. Who creates these meets and bounds descriptions of your property? A surveyor. Again, and a surveyor has monuments in it, he has benchmarks in it. He also might have a datum in it. A datum is a relative point of elevation because properties do go up and down, they're just not flat everywhere. All right, this is a benchmark. This is something that's placed somewhere where everybody knows exactly where it is. So again, a benchmark is always man-made. A monument can be man-made or natural. So in terms of the hierarchy of real estate and how we define where our property is located, the top description of where our property is located, the top description is the meets and bounds description. Again, that's known as the legal description because we use it on mortgages and deeds. The next in the hierarchy, one level down. Now, one level down is the lot and block number. We use the lot and block number so the town knows where to tax you. We use the lot and block number in a unit deed on a condo. We use a lot and block number on a unit deed on a condo. What's more important in terms of real estate? The meets and bounds definition is more important. And then the least important thing, and we're going to hear a lot about the post office over the next 2 weeks, but the least important thing is the address. The address is just where the mailman brings your mail. It has no legal ramifications at all. The legal description is the meets and bounds description. You can always tell when you have a meets and bounds description because it has a point of beginning and a point of ending. Who does the meets and bounds description? A surveyor. And then we have one other form of property description which we do not use in New Jersey. We use it west of the Mississippi River. It's called the government survey system. You will not have questions on the test about this except to say we don't use it. The government survey system has townships and sections. It has more of a square, based on a square piece of property. And we use it west of the Mississippi River. And if you look at a map of the United States, you'll see that when they get west of the Mississippi, many of the states have square lines. Many of the states have lines that are perpendicular or parallel to latitude or longitude because they're using the government survey system. In New Jersey, we use the meets and bounds definition, known as the legal description. Who does that? The surveyor. When describing meets and bounds is distance and direction. What comes first in the verbiage is beginning at a point of, and then you're going to head in a direction for a number of feet. Okay, there is not a exact convention that says you have to say head east 100 feet or head 100 feet east first. It just depends on how they're writing it up. Yeah, four corners is nice to see. Okay. What direction comes first in a meets and bounds? That's a good question. We go clockwise. So we head north first, and then we turn in the clockwise direction, then come south, and then come back east again. Okay. I don't think they're going to ask about a direction in a meets and bounds, but if they do, it's clockwise. Oh, Angela says they do use it, so we go clockwise. The other thing that's always on the test is an acre. An acre is a measure of area. And remember, area is feet times feet. And feet times feet is feet to the second power. That's why we call it square feet. Not because the shape is square, but because this is the square of something. Feet to the second power is a square. That's why we call it square feet. It's a measure of area. There's 43,560 square feet in an acre. And everybody is telling me on the test that's always on there. I'm looking at your reference in the book, Angela, on meets and bounds. Are you showing me that it's always in the clockwise or are you looking at the example? Okay, I'll have to read that a little bit more later on. You might have to know that a mile is 5,280 feet. A couple other things you might have to know. Let's. I don't know if we're going to hit them, but we'll go through this first. You might have to know front feet. We talked about front feet is always the linear measurement along the road, the front of the lot. So if the lot is 50 by 100, the first number you express is the frontage. You always express the frontage first. So if we call this lot here a 50 by 100 lot, the 50 would be along the road, okay? 50 by 100, typically it sits along the road. We have things that are called setbacks. We have front setbacks, rear setbacks, and side setbacks. So if you have, this lot would be a 50 by 100 lot. If you had a 50 by 100 lot, and you might have a front setback of 30 feet, that means your building has to be 30 feet from the street. You might have a rear setback of 20 feet. That means your building has to end before 20 feet to your rear property line. You might have 10 feet side setbacks on both sides. So now if you had a 50 by 100 lot, the biggest house you could build, we have 30 we have to take off here and 20 we have to take off here, off the 100. That means the deepest our house could be would be 50 feet. And the widest it could be is 50 feet minus 10 and minus 10. So the widest it could be would be 30 feet. So that's the front foot. So our house could be 30 by 50, and 30 by 50 is 1,500 square feet. Now, sometimes on the test, they trick you and they say, what's the biggest house you could build here? If it's 2 stories, well, we just found out that the footprint can be 1,500 square feet, but if it's going to be 2 stories, it would be 3,000 square feet. It would be 3,000 square feet if it was 2 stories. So sometimes on the test, they're going to give you this question about setbacks. We're going to skip 6 because we're running to get right to 7 and 8 tonight. Chapter 7, easements, restrictions, and the rights of adjoining property owners. Important part of the test, a lot of questions on the test. So easements are types of encumbrances. An encumbrance is a claim against, limitation on, or liability against real estate. Encumbrances include liens, deed restrictions, easements, encroachments, and licenses. An encumbrance can restrict the owner's ability to transfer title to the property or lessen its value. It represents some right or claim of another to a portion of the property or the use of the property. And we'll find it when we do an abstract of title after the title search, because you record easements or you record certain encumbrances. Liens are always financial claims. So I don't want you to have to read all through this, but liens are always financial claims. Deed restrictions or contractual obligations that the grantor placed in the transfer of the property that restricts something about the property to the new owner. That's a deed restriction, and that is a type of encumbrance. So again, a lien is a type of encumbrance, always a financial claim. A deed restriction is a type of encumbrance that is always about use. And then we have easements. Okay. Now, in easements, we have the land that God gave us, to the center of the earth below, to the heavens above, and all things attached by man or nature. And my favorite thing attached by nature is your bundle of rights. And in your bundle of rights, one of the rights you have is you have the right to tell other people, stay the hell off my property. So in your bundle of rights, you have the right to tell someone to stay off your property. So if we were to take that right out of your bundle of rights, and we say that just this joker here, we're going to give him an easement, we're going to give him just this one stick out of the bundle of rights, and we are now never going to be able to tell him again he can't cross over our property. That's what an easement is. We're going to tell him we can never again restrict him from crossing over our property. And we would grant him that easement through a deed, or we would reserve it in a will, or we'd reserve it as a grantor. We'll talk about how we create these easements. There's 2 types of easements. There's an easement appurtenant. Easement appurtenant is said to run with the land. An easement in gross is an easement that's given to like a utility company when they run high tension wires over your property, or in case of New Jersey Natural Gas, when they run gas pipelines through your property. That's an easement in gross. An easement appurtenant is an easement that is said to run with the land. So let's talk about an easement appurtenant that is said to run with the land. So in an easement appurtenant, and I have an easement appurtenant on my office in Highland Park. I have an easement appurtenant. It is said to run with the land. So in my office in Highland Park, next to my office in Highland Park, there's a building that's a 6-family. Okay. And when the owner who owned the whole property sold off this part of the property, he kept an easement for himself. And what this easement for himself does is down here is part of my property and my lot, but I can no longer keep him from driving his car over my lot to get to his property. I can no longer restrict him from driving over my lot to get to his property. He is the dominant tenement. He is the dominant tenement. And I am the servient tenement. I'm serving him by letting him drive over my property to get to his lot. Now, I don't like this, but it was in the deed when I purchased the property. And since it's in the deed when I purchased the property, I'm stuck with it because an easement appurtenant runs with the land. And that means if a new owner buys this property from me, buys my lot from me, he is bound by that same easement. And if the dominant tenement sells his property, the new buyer is still benefiting from the easement. And that's an easement appurtenant. It is said to run with the land. In other words, we don't care who owns the land. One property owner has the right to cross over the others. And your question is, does this decrease the value? Absolutely. Absolutely. Where would we find out if this was the case? And when we did a title search, because these easements, how do you transfer any right or interest in property? You transfer it by deed. And so there was a deed created. There was a deed that created this easement. Okay, so when we did a title search, we found it. And this bothers me a lot because when this guy drives across my lot in the wintertime, when it snows, he packs all down the snow here, and it makes it harder for my old back to shovel the snow because it all gets packed down. Plus, it lessens the value of my property. That's an easement appurtenant. Okay. Said to run with the land. An easement in gross is like a pipeline underneath your property or like high tension wires over your property. An easement in gross does not have a dominant and servient estate. And these were usually created by eminent domain, right? There's a big controversy about a pipeline running across the middle of America with some indigenous American tribes complaining about it and with just cause. But through eminent domain, they're going to take that right to run that through there. Yeah, ask him nicely to shovel my snow. Thank you. I'm getting too old for that. I hired a landscaper this year for the first time in 22 years. How do we create an easement? An easement can be created by express grant or reservation. And what does that mean? Well, you can give somebody an easement. So let's say that easement on my property wasn't there, and the next door neighbor said, hey, would you grant me that easement? I'll pay you a lot of money if you grant me an easement so I can come across your property. Well, we could create it by grant. That's one way, is we could create it by grant. We can also create it by reservation. When the property was all one big piece of property, and by the way, it's owned by the Romanos. It was all one big piece of property owned by the Romanos. When the Romanos subdivided it and sold off the part that I'm on, they reserved the right in their deed to cross. They reserved the right, so it can be done by reservation. It can also be done by implied grant or reservation, where if it was obvious that that was their intention, was to reserve an easement because otherwise you couldn't get to their property, then that would also create a easement through implied grant or reservation. And this is one of my favorites, by prescription. The reason you see no hunting signs around this time of year is not because people like deer and they don't want you to kill deer. It's because if you were to go on somebody's land for a long enough of a period of time, just like adverse possession, that you could create an easement by prescription. I've hunted on your land every year for the last 30 years. Therefore, I have the permanent right to use your land for hunting. That's why they post those no hunting signs, because they want to make it clear that no one is to hunt on their property. The next one is condemnation. If this property needed to have this easement, but let's say this was a fire department here and they wanted to make sure they could drive across my lot to get to their fire trucks, they could do it through eminent domain, through the process of condemnation. They could also do it by necessity. If you had a big piece of property and here's the road here and you're subdividing it this way and you're selling off this lot in the back for him to build a house, well, it might be necessary for him to have an easement to get to his house. By the way, what this is called is a flag lot. If you don't have any frontage, that's a flag lot. Towns don't like those very much, but that's what they're called. Have you ever seen a house that's tucked back behind a house and it doesn't have any frontage on the street? That's called a flag lot. And also we can create an easement by reference to a subdivision plat. So if you're a developer and you're building a subdivision, you want to give everybody an easement to use the roads so that everybody in the subdivision gets to use the roads. So we can also create an easement by sale with reference to a subdivision plat. Now, how do we terminate an easement? These are the ways we terminate an easement. Let's go back to my property again. Here's the Romanos over here. Here's me here. Remember, I am the servient estate. So I want to end this easement. I want to end it, but I cannot. Only the dominant estate can terminate an easement. Only the dominant estate can terminate an easement. So only the Romanos can terminate an easement. Okay? Another way we could end this easement, another way we could end the easement is by merger. If all of a sudden here's the Romanos and here's me, if I bought their property, it would terminate the easement because I would no longer need an easement to cross over my own property. So it would terminate the easement. Another way to terminate the easement is if the Romanos, who have a 6-family house here, tore the house down and disappeared, it could end by abandonment. It could also end by the terms of the instrument that created it. And that would mean that the Romanos got an easement for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, the easement is over. And it could also be terminated by termination of purpose. So in the Romanos case, if they wanted to access Woodbridge Avenue, and if there was a side road or a back road or an alleyway constructed that allowed easy access to their property, then we might be able to terminate it by termination of purpose. Okay, those are all ways we terminate an easement. And easements are very, very, very prevalent. A lot of times when you're selling a house and it's for sale and they do a title search, they find out, oh my goodness, there's an easement here. And are you required to tell the buyer about easements? Yes. You're required to let the buyers know that there is an easement on the property. And many times the real estate agent does not know. Many times the homeowner who's selling the property does not know, but it's something that's going to show up in the title insurance. And if it were to show up in the title insurance and you did not tell the buyer that there was an easement, the buyer would not have reality of consent and therefore would have a voidable contract. Okay?
Bruce, I have a question.
Yep.
Once you merge two lots and the easement disappear.
Yep.
So later on, somebody can somebody be subdivided and retrospect.
So good question. Here's the Romanos and here's me. So I buy their property, that terminates the easement, right? And now I want to sell that back half off again. I want to sell it to somebody else. But the person who's looking to buy it now, the new buyer who's back here, or a new buyer says, I'm not going to buy it unless I have an easement. I can recreate that easement and I would create it by grant, right? I would create that new easement by grant. I would grant them an easement. Okay? I hope that answered the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
The next thing, we talked about this the other night, next time you go to the movies, when you pay your money and they hand you the things to let you go in, go to your friend and say, I bet you we don't have tickets. And your friend is going to say, yes, we do. You just bought them. You say, no, I bet you we don't have tickets. Turn your ticket upside down and it's going to say, this is a license. Because a license is a temporary, revocable, non-transferable permission to use somebody's property. So when you have a ticket to the movie theater, you have a license. When you have a ticket to Yankee Stadium, you have a license. That means it's revocable. They can throw you out. They can throw you out in the event that you do something you're not supposed to. Okay. Now, when you look at the hierarchy of what you would rather have, if you were the Romanos, you would much rather have an easement. And then the next thing down the list is maybe you would rather have a lease so you could drive across my property. And the last thing, the lowest level, is a license. because I can revoke a license at any time, okay? So if you were the Romanos, you'd rather have an easement. If it was me and they were asking, I would rather give them a license because I could take it back. Deed restrictions, as the name implies, are written in deeds. They pass from owner to owner forever. So if a property decides to sell and has a restriction placed in a deed, what future owners can or cannot do on the property, it's an encumbrance. And they're troublesome sometimes on large parcels. And I want to tell you, many properties in New Jersey were built with deed restrictions that said Caucasians and Gentiles only. And again, that was made illegal by a court case in 1965. And this is one of the things that caused so much discrimination around. There was neighborhoods that said Caucasians and Gentiles only. That was a deed restriction. And a deed restriction can be terminated. A deed restriction can be terminated by final judgment in an action to quiet title or an action to determine the validity of the restrictions. So those deed restrictions are still in people's deeds that have the original deed, but they're all no longer valid because it's been terminated because of that court case. Other ways easements can end is by release of the party who placed the restriction, by an expiration of a time limit, again, by merger of all the lots affected, by abandonment of a restriction by non-enforcement. I had a case of this, a deed restriction that said no pets over 30 pounds. And they never enforced the over 30 pounds restriction until somebody brought in a pit bull. Then they wanted to enforce the over 30 pounds. And the owner of the pit bull sued and said, you can't enforce this restriction because you did non-enforcement against it up until now. Again, by material change in a neighborhood, by act of the public authorities, and that's again condemnation through the right of eminent domain. Again, it could have a time limit. When Eric Weinberg bought the biggest and most expensive house in Highland Park years ago, there was a deed restriction placed in it that said he could not subdivide the property for 10 years. And that 10 years has passed. If he chose to, he could subdivide the property now. You could also terminate an easement by mutual agreement of all the parties entitled to enforce the restriction. And of course, we talked about this a minute ago, by final judgment in an action to quiet title or an action to determine the validity of those restrictions. All different ways that we can terminate easements. Not easements, I'm sorry, terminate restrictions. All different ways we can terminate restrictions. We also have encroachments. Encroachments is when your improvement is on your neighbor's land or your neighbor's improvement is on your land. And we find an encroachment by doing a survey. So a surveyor finds an encroachment. And here we have an example of an encroachment. The property line is this blue line. And the homeowner in this house built this fence. Now, how can you tell he built the fence? It's easy, because fences have to have the ugly side facing the guy who built it, right? Fences have to have the finished side facing your neighbor, the ugly side facing the house that built it. So he built his fence and he's this far over the property line. That means he's encroaching on his neighbor's property. Now, what's the problem with him encroaching on his neighbor's property? Is if his neighbor never does anything about it, it could create an adverse possession claim. And in an adverse possession claim, this guy, this homeowner, could claim that property, okay? In an adverse possession claim. And we have a chapter in adverse possession we'll do another night. Again, we find encroachments with a survey. Encroachments are quite often something that you find because surveys, people who live in a house for 30, 40, 50 years, they kind of forget where the property lines are. How do we find encroachments? A surveyor finds an encroachment. Why does that create a problem? Because it's going to create an issue with the title insurance, because title insurance only covers unknown defects, and an encroachment is a known defect. So the title insurance company might say, you know, everything else looks good, but you've got an encroachment, so we're not going to insure the property. You would have to go to your neighbor and say, listen, buddy, you got to take that fence down. You got to move it over 6 feet. All right. And again, many times when you've sold a house, you're getting close to closing. They don't order the title search until the very end. The title search comes back and there's an encroachment. And now you've got a problem that you've got to resolve before you can close. And it can be a deal breaker. Now, if you know about the encroachment, are you required to tell easement appertenant during showing? Well, you would be required to reveal it at some point before contract, and if not before contract, the attorney should reveal it in contract, but there should be a record that both sides know about it. If there's an encroachment and you don't know about it, you can't reveal it. If it's an encroachment and you do know about it, that's a defect, and you have an obligation to disclose the defect. We also have an obligation for lateral and subadjacent support. This is a picture of a row house in Philadelphia where the gentleman on the left decided he was going to excavate his basement in order to dig it out a little bit so that he could have a full height basement. And as he dug it out, the house next door to him, boom, fell over because he wasn't providing lateral support. So we have an obligation to lateral and sub-adjacent support. So Brandon asked, in New Jersey, do you have to have a certain amount of space between the property line and the fence? The answer is that's a municipal thing. So your municipal ordinances might say how much space you have to have between the property line and the fence, and you would find that in your zoning. And when you pulled your building permit for your fence, typically in Highland Park, when you pull a building permit for a fence, you have to provide a survey, and then you have to have the fence construction company show exactly where they're going to build the fence. And then when they come to sign off on your building permit, they want to make sure that you are a certain space away from the fence. So again, it's not a New Jersey thing, it's a municipal thing. Okay, and that brings us to Chapter 8. And, we chatted a little bit about Chapter 8 in this last chapter, so we're going to understand a little bit more about title and title protection. First of all, we're going to talk about recording. Recording is how we make constructive knowledge. So in the county clerk's office of each county, they have a location where they keep all the records of things that are recorded. In the county clerk's office in Monmouth is in Freehold. You can go in there and you can look around. They'll help you look for stuff if you want. And everything that's recorded in there is for public viewing, so to speak. And everything that's recorded serves as constructive knowledge. And what that means is we have constructed a way that the general public can find out what they need to find out about the ownership of a property or about the mortgages on a property by going to the county clerk's office. So they've constructed a knowledge base because we didn't always have computers. We didn't always have an easy way to look things up. So you used to go to the county clerk's office to look up who was the owner of a property or to look up what the property lines were, because remember, when you record a deed, it has to have an accompanying survey, a meets and bounds description. So again, all of this is kept at the county clerk's office. Recording something serves as constructive knowledge. In order to record something, it has to be accompanied with an acknowledgement, because the things that are recorded are signed. And then how does the county clerk know who signed it? The person who's going to sign it is going to swear that it's them. And then that swearing is going to be taken by an officer of the court. Okay, let's see, we got a question here. You could by going to the other, somebody asked, can you find out who the owner is of a property in another state? The answer is you could by going to that state. But a lot of this stuff is now showing up online. So now you can find a lot of this stuff online, but they're not going to talk about what you can find online on the test. They're going to talk about going to the county clerk's office to look up things that have constructive knowledge. Now, constructive notice or constructive knowledge is achieved by recording it. That means everybody has the opportunity to go find out what they need to find out. That's different from actual notice. Actual notice is the knowledge or actual knowledge is that happens between two parties. So if I sell you a house, you and I have actual knowledge or actual notice. And now you have the deed, right? Because I've transferred the deed to you, but I'm a sneaky guy and I want to go sell the house to this person over here and you haven't recorded it yet. There's no way that this person knows that I sold it to you. So again, it's very important that the grantee, the person who's receiving a property, make sure that that deed is recorded so that it can't be sold to someone else. But just between the parties, that is actual notice. Just between the parties, that is actual notice. So how long does someone have to record the deed? There's no time limit. The sooner the better, because property real estate fraud is one of the biggest crimes. And unfortunately, they don't prosecute it in some areas very vigorously, and the penalties for it aren't very great. So how soon should you record a deed? As quickly as you can get your butt down to the county clerk's office. And Middlesex County is very remiss in recording deeds. They record them very, very slowly. So sometimes that's nerve-wracking. Okay. So constructive notice or constructive knowledge is more important than actual notice or actual knowledge. The knowledge between two parties is actual knowledge or actual notice. Having it recorded so anybody can look it up is constructive knowledge. So the New Jersey law dictates the bank will send the mortgage for recording, but the deed is, sometimes it's not the bank that sends the deed. All right, a recording has to be accompanied by acknowledgement. It has to have recording fees. It has a time and date stamp. And remember that the time and date stamp gives priority. First lien, second lien, third lien, they're all determined by time and date. And a bona fide purchaser who records first has the best claim of ownership. Bona fide purchaser who records first has the best claim of ownership. Question is, who is the real owner? A very strange story is Timothy McVeigh and Timothy Nichols, who were people who were executed for blowing up the Murrow building in Oklahoma City, and they blew up the FBI building, which happened to have a daycare center downstairs and killed a lot of people. The reason they did that is they were mad about the FBI storming Ruby Ridge and killing all the Branch Davidians in Ruby Ridge. And their original form of terrorism was they stole a notary stamp. And using that notary stamp, they could do acknowledgments. And being able to do acknowledgments enabled them to forge deeds. And they forged deeds on all the FBI agents who were at Ruby Ridge. They would find out where that FBI agent owned property. They would forge a deed and make it look like that FBI sold that property to someone else, or they would forge a mortgage and look like a mortgage was placed on the property. And the problem was nobody noticed. And when nobody noticed, they were still mad at the FBI, so they decided to blow up the building instead. And again, for their decision, they were both executed. All right, in the old days, if you were going to buy a property, you would go to what's called a land attorney, and the land attorney would go to the county clerk's office and look up all the records, and he would write a attorney's opinion letter, and he would say, it's my opinion that the person who is selling it to you is truly the owner. And so your ownership was only good at your attorney's skill at investigating. That's not the best way to buy property. At some point, lawyers in Philadelphia and Chicago figured out that this is a risk thing. How much of a risk is it that the attorney was wrong? And since it's a risk thing, we can issue an insurance product on it. So they created title insurance. So what happens now is the risk with somebody having a higher claim can be evaluated and to be made an insurance product. And we do that with title insurance. We do that with title insurance. How does title insurance happen? The buyer has the ability to say who he wants as a title insurance company, and it doesn't matter because title insurance rates are regulated by the state of New Jersey. Everybody charges the same rate. So somebody, whether it's the buyer or the buyer's attorney, orders a title search. the title search is done at the county clerk's office, or if everything has been computerized, they do it online. But they prepare an abstract of title, which is a report of everything that went on with your title. They can go back about 60 years. Somebody has to go back to the previous slide. I will. Okay, so in current days, we no longer use that attorney's opinion letter. Instead, we get title insurance, and the title insurance company, it's insurance after all, so they're evaluating the risk. And if they think it's not too much risk, they'll issue you title insurance. Okay, so they're going to order a title search. They're going to prepare an abstract of title. Usually they go back somewhere up to 60 years. Usually it's not 60 years, just depends on how much the property has changed hands. They prepare a chain of title going back 60 years. So they say you're the 5th owner, and you got it from the 4th owner, and he got it from the 3rd owner, he got it from the 2nd owner. That's the chain of title. By the way, if there's a break in the chain of title, and a break in the chain of title would mean they don't know how it got from the 3rd owner to the 4th owner, but now it's the 5th owner. So we've got like a gap here in the title. That's a break in the chain of title. We can cure this with a motion to quiet title or with a quitclaim deed. Those are the two ways. This is called a cloud on title. So like there's a giant cloud over here over the title, casting shadows on the title. It's called a cloud on title because it's a break in the chain of title. So once they do this investigation and they have the abstract, the chain of title, they're going to write a title opinion letter, and you're going to sign your abstract of title. They're going to send it to the underwriters in the insurance company, in the title insurance company. The underwriters are going to look it over and look for defects. And if they find none, they're going to allow it to be underwritten. And when they're going to allow it to be underwritten, they're going to issue a title commitment. Title commitment. Okay. Now, on title insurance, there's some things they never cover. And the things that title insurance never covers is eminent domain. If the government is going to take your property through the right of eminent domain and the process of condemnation, your title insurance does not cover you. So through the right of eminent domain, the process of condemnation, your title insurance doesn't cover you. Also, they won't insure known risks. They won't give you a policy if there's risk that they know about. Yeah, any deed that you want to have as constructive knowledge needs to be recorded. So the question is, do you have to record a quitclaim deed in person? Is it valid if not taken to the courthouse? So it serves as actual knowledge if it's not taken to the courthouse. Do you have to record it in person? No, because if you have the officer of the court take the acknowledgement, then you can just send it into the courthouse. Okay. I have learned over the years that not having an attorney costs you a lot of money in the long run. So on little things like that, so easy to just hire an attorney. What are they going to charge you? A couple $100 bucks. It's not that much money. All right, so exclusions are things that are never covered. Exceptions are things that are just not going to cover on your deal. For instance, you've got a property and your neighbor's fence runs across your property. They may choose to issue a title insurance, but they're going to put an exception here that says that little corner of your property that your neighbor's fence cut off, they are not going to cover that. So if your neighbor brings an adverse possession claim, you're on your own, buddy. So that's what an exception is. And again, an exclusion is eminent domain because title insurance never covers you against eminent domain, and they don't cover you against known risks unless they issue an exception. Now, the normal coverage, the normal policy for title insurance is called a fee policy. Let's see, we got a question here. Okay, so the question is, please define risk. Here's the risk. I'll give you a crazy example. What is it, about 300 years ago now, the Dutch owned New Jersey, and the native indigenous American people were the Lenape Indians. And the Dutch signed a treaty with the Lenape Indians. and it granted them Old Bridge. It gave them Old Bridge. Why Old Bridge? Because Old Bridge was the swamp. So again, they were tricking them. And the Native American indigenous tribe that was in New Jersey, the Lenape Indians, there are no surviving heirs, no surviving protege. So there's no Lenape Indians left. So in the event that somebody wanted to make a claim and say, you guys took New Jersey from us and we had a treaty, New Jersey is ours, that would be a title insurance issue, okay? The funny thing is they found some remains in Cheesequake of Lenape Indians, and they were able to get extractable DNA. And now the weird question is, maybe this tribe didn't go extinct. Maybe this tribe was just relocated to, up to the Iroquois tribes of New York, or maybe down south a little bit further. And maybe there's some surviving heirs, and they might be able to come back and claim Old Bridge. But if they came back to claim Old Bridge, all the people who were losing their homes in Old Bridge because of this claim, their title insurance would cover them. And here's the magic, or the bad news, up to purchase price. Title insurance covers you up to purchase price. Title insurance covers the purchasers and the purchasers' heirs. Now, if you have a chance later on tonight and you think my story about Lenape Indians is crazy, there is a major lawsuit now that's going to the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court term, about some Native American tribes claiming Oklahoma. So if they win, they're going to own Oklahoma. And how would all the people who own houses in Oklahoma be compensated? With their title insurance policy, how much would they get? Up to purchase price. So if they purchased their house 50 years ago for $9,000, title insurance is only going to cover $9,000 up to purchase price. All right, title insurance is not assignable. That means when you sell your house, your coverage does not cover the guy who buys it from you. Again, it does cover the purchaser and their heirs. So when my parents passed away, myself and my siblings inherited their house. They paid $9,000 for it. When we inherited their house, it was worth $300,000. Their title insurance, though, only covered up to their purchase price of $9,000. But it covered us up to $9,000 because we were the heirs. So if we wanted to keep that house, or if we wanted to borrow money on it because there was no mortgage, the lender would probably want us to upgrade our coverage to $300,000. And we would do that with what's called a lender's policy. Now, the reason it doesn't matter who you use for title insurance is because the rates are set by the state. The rates are set by the state. So if a house is not paid off, no, a quitclaim will not transfer ownership. And why? Anybody remember why just giving somebody a quitclaim deed to a house, if there's still a mortgage on it, will not transfer ownership? And the reason is in your mortgage, there is an acceleration clause for alienation. There's a specific kind of acceleration clause called an alienation clause. An alienation means to change ownership. So if you are changing ownership from you to your children and you have a mortgage, then the mortgage gets accelerated, and which means you have to pay it off. All right, you'll get endorsements on your policy that cover you and show you the limits and all that stuff. The rates are set by the state, so it doesn't matter which company you use. All the rates are exactly the same. And again, in my case, we might get a lender's policy if I was going to pull money out of my parents' house instead of selling it. And I would have to pay for the increased coverage up to $350,000. Okay, a couple of questions. So,
Hey, Bruce.
yes.
Silly question. So over the years, if your house pricing goes up, do you have to revise the title insurance?
So it's not a bad idea. You can. It's not a bad idea.
Oh, so people do that though?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And if you're going to take out another loan, or you're getting a home equity loan or something, it's the bank might require you to do it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so let's work on these 5 questions for a minute. Excuse me. Shabazz, you got the right answer. All right, let's run some of these answers. Which of the following is acceptable as evidence of marketable title? A title insurance policy. Now, what happens if you look at the sales contract when you're filling out your contracts, when you're working for a buyer, in the contract, it will say what kind of a title you want, and it'll say the title must be good and marketable. When it says it must be good and marketable, what it means is that there is the ability to have a title insurance policy issued on that property. And sometimes on the contract, it will limit the amount of money that the seller would have to spend to provide good and clear title. Because maybe if he's an encroachment that's going to cost him $100,000 to fix, maybe he doesn't want to sell the property if he has to spend $100,000 to fix it. Number 2, an abstract of title does not provide evidence of title unless it is accompanied by a legal opinion of title. Number 3, a written summary of the history of all the conveyances and legal proceedings affecting a specific parcel of real estate is called an abstract of title. It's the report that's done after the title search. Documents affecting real estate are recorded or filed with the county in which the property is located, and it's to give constructive notice or constructive knowledge of the real estate interest. The primary reason a buyer obtains title insurance is to make sure the buyer has marketable title. And what does it mean that he has marketable title? It means that when he goes to sell it, the buyer who's going to buy it from him is also going to accept his ownership as having been proved, so to speak. Utility company has recorded the right to erect poles on an owner's property and run electrical lines over it. The utility company has an easement in gross. I always like to think about when they run sewer pipes underneath your house, you know, to the line, the sewers that you flush your toilet into. That's really gross. So it makes it easy to remember that's an easement in gross. An easement appertenant is one that has two adjacent properties. We're going to skip number 2 because we've come to the conclusion that the math here is impossible. We're just going to skip that. Number 3, a lien on real property can be created by. So how can we create a lien on real property? Remember, a lien is a what? A financial claim. Which one of these is a financial claim?
Contractor.
A contractor who makes payments. That's called a mechanic's lien. You didn't pay your contractor. That's called a mechanic's lien. By the way, that's the right answer. Is a mechanic's lien a voluntary or involuntary lien? Involuntary. Good.
Involuntary. Involuntary.
And is it a general or specific lien?
Specific.
Specific lien. So only on the property he did the work on. Good. You guys are starting to get this stuff. I like that. All right, T has an easement over the land of U. T purchased used land and resold it to V without mentioning the easement. That's not good, but unfortunately, the easement remains intact because it's an easement appertenant. So the easement remains intact. Now, he might have an actionable claim where he could sue, but it's a easement appertenant, so it remains there. A landowner who has property takes water from a river throwing through the property. He's exercising his riparian rights. Water that has flow, that has ripples, like ripples on a stream, riparian rights. So he's exercising his riparian rights. A property has littoral rights. And I like to tell you to think of litter on the beach. So littoral rights are land that borders a sea, lake, or ocean, larger bodies of water that are affected by high and low tide. That's littoral rights. All right, so we're going to throw in one more chapter tonight because we didn't work hard enough last night. This is a quick one. Environmental laws. New Jersey is a very polluted state because we had a lot of manufacturing here. Mack Trucks started out in New Jersey. Johnson & Johnson's here. Merck is here or was here, started out here. Lots of pollution. People just thought they could dump their industrial byproducts into the groundwater. One of the mottos of New Jersey, this is the bridge that goes from Philadelphia to Trenton. It's what Trenton makes, the world takes, because we were so well known for manufacturing. Lots of spots that have all kinds of pollution all throughout New Jersey. Lots of problems with our groundwater because of the pollution that was dumped into the groundwater. Lots of problems with our groundwater because there's naturally occurring things like arsenic in the water. And because of that, we have the Private Well Testing Act. Every time you sell a house that has a well for the drinking water, and that's called the potable water supply, every time you have a house that has a well for the potable water supply, you have to have an addendum for the Private Well Testing Act. And the Private Well Testing Act says that the seller will test the well and provide the results to the buyer. The seller doesn't have to fix it, just has to test it and provide the results to the buyer. New Jersey housing is expensive, partially because of pollution, but partially because we're the most densely populated state. And we get to the end of the chapter, we're going to say that part of the reason it's so expensive in New Jersey is we have so much anti-development laws in New Jersey protecting environmentally sensitive land. And we're starting out with with little land anyway. New Jersey is more densely populated than Japan. So again, very densely populated state. Potable water doesn't mean the well to water your plants or work your garden. Potable water means the drinking water for the house. I live in Colts Neck. Everybody has a well in Colts Neck. Everybody has a potable well, potable water supply in Colts Neck. If we sell your house in Colts Neck, you have to have the well tested and provide the results to the buyer. Next thing is we have a lot of underground storage tanks. And there's a underground storage tank law that governs over 2,000 gallons and one that governs under 2,000 gallons. This is chapter 27, under 2,000 gallons. These are all examples of underground storage tanks. This one over here on this corner, this is like you have in a gas station. If you notice as you drive by gas stations, you'll see them digging up the whole gas station and pulling out the old metal tanks and putting in these new plastic ones because they don't corrode. We don't worry about that, and you're not going to have a question about that on the test, but you will have a question about these other underground storage tanks that were used to provide heating oil for houses. These are all actual tanks that I've been involved with over the last year or two. So what happens, I would not be a buyer who would accept an underground oil tank on a property I was buying, even if it had been properly abandoned and it had been properly abandoned with permits. I would not accept it as allowing it when I bought the house. I'm under contract to buy a house in Edison now, and the first thing I'm going to do is do an oil tank sweep because I would not ever have a house with an oil tank. The problem is, even they abandoned the property correctly, who knows if it had leaked. So when you call to have a tank removed, the first thing they do is you pull a permit, you pull the tank out, and you can see all these areas where the contractor cuts a hole in it. When they cut the hole in the tank, the municipality comes out and looks inside. If they see evidence of a leak, then they file an EPA claim. And when that EPA claim is filed, it creates a lien against the property that can't be lifted. That's a financial claim. A lien is a financial claim that can't be lifted until the property is cleaned up. And if you've had a leak, they're going to have to remediate, and then a geologist is going to have to come out and give you a letter of no further action. And I have a property that I have I'm managing for Fannie Mae in South River that the oil cleanup is well over $100,000 now for a little tiny 3-bedroom house. So again, I don't like oil tanks. Over 2,000 gallon tanks falls into the law of underground storage tanks, UST law, and that's a whole different story. These are what you would find in a gas station, but not in a home. The next thing we find in a home is asbestos. Asbestos is a mineral fiber that is used for many things, but the main thing in houses is to insulate against heat. You'd wrap it around your pipes to insulate. The old days, you actually used it to keep your basement cool. You would wrap the asbestos around your pipes so you wouldn't warm up your basement with the steam risers. And that's because you didn't have refrigerators in the old days, and you'd want to keep your potatoes and stuff in a root cellar. You wouldn't want it getting warm. But asbestos is dangerous. The molecules, if inhaled, nothing dissolves in your lungs. So if you inhale asbestos and it sits in your lungs, it's an irritant, and over long range, it can cause asbestosis. Asbestos is considered a hazard when it becomes friable. And here you can see a picture of an actual piece of asbestos that has become friable. These little pieces are starting to flake off and going to the atmosphere. And as you breathe them, they lodge in your lungs, and it could end up causing asbestosis. So we got a question here. Carmen, I don't know if it causes mesothelm. I don't even know how to pronounce that yet. So I'll take your word for it, but I don't know if it does create, if inhaling asbestos molecules create that. What happens is when you're going to cancer of the lung, okay. Another word I can't pronounce yet. I'll have to work on that tonight and let you know. Thank you very much, though. On the other side here is asbestos that's been correctly wrapped, and you can see it's completely encapsulated and it's not starting to peel off. One of the ways you remediate asbestos is to wrap it correctly. In other ways, you remove it. When you remove the asbestos, it has to be done by a licensed contractor. They create a negative airflow. They wear uniforms, and they spray it down because by spraying it, the molecules don't become airborne, and then they scrub it all off. And then when they're done, they paint these pipes with a specific color paint, and that allows laymen, regular people, to know that it has been actually treated by an asbestos technician and not just a homeowner. And if we look over here, we can see a homeowner did what homeowners like to do. They wrap their asbestos in some kind of aluminum foil or duct tape, and that's not the way you remediate asbestos. Again, asbestos, there is no law that says you have to remove asbestos. There's no law that says you have to remove it. It's it's part of the negotiation between the buyer and the seller. Again, I'll look up those two forms of cancer you're talking about, but it also causes asbestos cancer, asbestosis. Another kind of health hazard, which is no longer a health hazard, is urea formaldehyde foam insulation. This was thought to be a carcinogenic because it would degrade into formaldehyde gas. In 1980s, it was prohibited to use this, but then they redid the studies and they decided it was okay to use this. So it is legal. It is legal again, but you don't really want it in your house because who knows if it's really harmful or not. And there is a negative perception about it because it had been legal for 20 years. Illegal. It had been illegal for 20 years. The next thing is carbon monoxide poisoning. Here is a story from not too long ago about some people who died June 15th, 2019, a little over a year ago, who died of carbon monoxide poisoning in their house. And what they died from in their house is they had no electricity. They were running generators, produced carbon monoxide gas. It's colorless and odorless, and you die, you fall asleep and you die. You know, you get a headache first, then you fall asleep, and then you die. So again, how do we not get poisoned by carbon dioxide? The way we not get poisoned by carbon dioxide is we have a carbon monoxide detector within 10 feet of every bedroom. Okay, so you have to have a carbon monoxide detector within 10 feet of every bedroom. And they have just changed the laws again. You have to have a 10-year sealed battery now. Okay, 10-year sealed battery. So they went from being $39 to being $89. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about, carbon monoxide detectors. Again, 10-year sealed batteries in them now is required. We have waste disposal sites in New Jersey. Every municipality used to have its own town dump, and you would dump stuff in it, or there was dumps for chemical plants or dumps for other things. Under the Waste Disposal Site Sanitary Landfill Facility Closure Act, you have to notify and inform a buyer if they are buying a house or building a house on something that had formerly been a sanitary landfill facility. So there is an obligation to notify and inform. We do build on top of these things, but there is an obligation to notify and inform the buyer. The next thing is lead paint. And the more I research lead paint, the more disturbing it gets. Lead is an element that was present in paint as a hardening agent, made the paint much more durable and much brighter. Dutch Boy paint was the #1 paint in New Jersey, Dutch Boy white. The Dutch Boy company knew that lead paint caused neurological damage, and the neurological damage has an effect based on body mass, and who has the smallest body mass? Children. And they knew it caused damage, so they created this little image of the Dutch Boy. They sold Dutch Boy dolls and Dutch Boy lamps, so it, psychologically would appear it was okay for children, and it's not. So anything that was built after 1978 is not allowed to have lead paint. And because we have to make sure that we notify people about it, if a house was built prior to 1978, you have to use a lead paint disclosure. And there is a $10,000 fine for not using this lead paint disclosure. On the lead paint disclosure, the seller says whether they have knowledge or report of the lead, and they also swear that if they find out there's lead, they'll let the buyer know. And then the buyer has the ability to waive their right to do an inspection for lead, or they keep the right to do an inspection for lead, and they have a limited time to do the inspection. And again, the seller does not have to remediate for lead, but the buyer could kill the deal if it had an unacceptable level of lead. In a house in Highland Park, because most of the houses in Highland Park were built over 100 years ago, there's always lead, but it's typically encapsulated by subsequent layers of paint. But from time to time, I will have a buyer who will say, I want the house certified lead-free, and you can do that and get a certified lead-free certificate. It costs on those 100-year-old, 1,700 square foot, 3-bedroom homes in Highland Park, $25,000 to totally remediate for lead. Next thing is radon. Radon is a colorless, odorless gas that's heavier than air. It's created by the decay of a radioactive isotope, and it's heavier than air, so hydrostatic pressure pushes it up through your floor, and even a cement floor is somewhat porous, and then a thin layer of radon lays on the floor of your basement. And if you're going to use your basement, for living in, and you're going to have children who are close to the floor or who are crawling around on the floor, you might be aware of radon, and you might not want it in your house. And if you have a level of radon in your house and you want to remediate, this is a device. These are about $3,000 now to put one of these devices on. And what it does is you have your floor in your house, you dig a hole in the floor, so to speak, so that the radon, because it's heavier than air, flows off your floor into the hole, and then it pumps it outside and it vents it to the outside, that radon remediation device. Now, when we check for radon, there's no rule that says the seller has to fix radon if there's a high level of radon. And again, you can see this is how the radon remediation device works. It collects it in something underneath the floor of the basement. The radon flows into the floor, and then it's pumped out of the house. The acceptable level of radon is 4 picocuries per liter. Picocuries, named after Madame Curie. It's a level of radiation. 4 picocuries per liter. That's a pretty low level. It's really easy to have that kind of a level. And if you had a 5 or 6 and the buyers were very environmentally sensitive, they might ask that it get remediated. I hope they're not changing it to 3.9. Canada, the level is 8. So again, Nancy, if you could find something about that, let me know. But the level of radon right now is 4 picocuries per liter. Next thing is electromagnetic fields. And you can see the date on this, 5/11/2020. I was doing a market analysis on this house right here. And one of the things I had to do is I had to subtract value when I did my appraisal on the house due to these high tension wires behind the house. High tension wires are not a proven health hazard, but they do through external obsolescence reduce the value of a house. Okay, and typically they say high tension wires reduce your house by 15%. So I grew up in a neighborhood with high tension wires right behind my house when I was a kid, and everybody always thought that the high tension wires were a health hazard, but they weren't. Some of them still swear that the high tension wires is what made me crazy. The next thing is mold. Mold is an organism that grows in the presence of moisture and in the absence of airflow. Mold can cause problems with people who have asthma or who have a sensitivity to mold. There's no rule that says you have to remediate for mold. It's by contract negotiations between the seller and the buyer. In order to remove mold like this, he is probably spraying that mold with a solution of water and bleach. And you could scrape all this stuff off, but there are millions of each organisms here on this mold. So you could kill all but one of the million and it's going to come back. What you have to do is eliminate the moisture. Sometimes the mold, especially in sheetrock, you might have to replace all the sheetrock. Right. Mold does affect people who are sensitive. And down south, there is a different kind of a species of mold that doesn't do well up here, and it's called black mold. Even though this is all black, the black mold type of mold is a very bad health hazard. Next thing is we're talking about industrial pollution. Industrial pollution, a lot of it in New Jersey. The Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act of 1980 created a chain of responsibility for cleaning up environmental issues. There was a individual and joint responsibility, so everybody in the chain of ownership could be responsible for cleaning up an environmental issue. And that was real too draconian in terms of the responsibility. So they passed again, to get rid of this individual liability, individually and joint liability. When it got ready to expire, they did the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act of 1986 called SARA. And SARA extended an amended circular, but it gave what's called limited liability. Let me go back to the other slide for Carmen. Okay, so they created SARA, and SARA would give innocent landowner immunity following you met these 4 conditions. The pollution was caused by a third party. The property was acquired by the owner after the placement of the substance. The owner did not know of the problem. There's a typo there. And due care was exercised to determine if there was hazardous waste. If you meet all 4 of those conditions, then you are not in that jointly and individually responsible claim, a chain of responsibility under SARA, Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act. Innocent landowner immunity. Sometimes that's what shows up on the test. Brandon, which slide? This next thing is called the Industrial Site Recovery Act. Every commercial endeavor in New Jersey is given a code. And that code, which is administered through Department of Community Affairs, determines whether or not you have to do an environmental impact statement when you sell a property. And as an example, I sold a hotel in Perth Amboy. The code on that said there was little risk of a hotel causing environmental issues. So my code said I did not have to do an environmental impact study. 2 blocks away, I sold a gas station. And of course, the code on the gas station said I did have to do an environmental impact statement on the gas station. And it turned out it was leaking. Now, the way they have changed this law is really bad, because now the real estate agent actually has a responsibility to look up the code. So you have to actually call up Trenton and have them send you the list of the codes and look up how your building might apply to the code, which is really unfair. They used to just have everything listed on a very long list, but I guess they had too many deviations and they wanted to push off some of the responsibility. So if you're going to sell a commercial property, you want to find out what the ISRA code is. ISRA stands for Industrial Site Recovery Act. Industrial Site Recovery Act. All right, the next thing in New Jersey, we talked about this a little earlier, is land is very expensive in New Jersey, probably twice as expensive as anywhere else in the country. You know, not Manhattan, of course, or San Francisco, but, you know, regular places. Part of the reason is we have all these anti-development laws in New Jersey for environmentally sensitive areas. Lots of places, we have the Pinelands Act, the Highlands Act, the Wetlands Act, the Coastal Act, and all of that to keep our planet healthy for the future. Okay, so that's a good class for tonight. I think we got a lot of stuff in here. I'm not sure what we're going to do tomorrow or Thursday yet, but Nancy, I'll let you guys know. And it just depends on what they do about this meeting tomorrow night for the board meeting. I'll let you know what happens on there and how many people flake out over this Zillow thing. That's really got me upset, but what can you do? Industrial Site Recovery Act for, Shabazz, I don't understand your question for test. So send it again, rewrite it again so I can answer it. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. Tomorrow night is the debate. We'll see how much housing stuff comes up in the debate. It's always nice when they talk about housing stuff and we have some kind of idea of what they're talking about. Tonight on the news, they talked again about the studies that show that a house in an African-American neighborhood appraises 25% less than the exact same house in a neighborhood that is mixed. Not just that it's a white neighborhood, but a mixed neighborhood. So again, I'm sure that's going to come up. And they've got to correct that stuff. So what's going on tomorrow with Zillow is Zillow's becoming a real estate brokerage. What's important to remember about the environmental laws for the test? The purpose of the environmental laws is to protect environmentally sensitive areas of New Jersey from development. And you know, the Pinelands Act is an important act because underneath the Pinelands is a giant aquifer. And you know, water is going to be the next oil. 20 years from now, when we all drive electric cars, the thing that's going to be the commodity that we're all going to be fighting over worldwide is water, because we're already in a water deficit in many countries. But underneath the Pinelands is a giant aquifer, a gigantic lake of super clean water that goes back thousands of years. So we don't want to develop on top of that aquifer, because if we did, we might pollute the water. The big aquifer that's under Los Angeles almost went dry a couple years ago. Los Angeles was having some droughts and the aquifer was down 40%. And they were getting ready to stop allowing farmers to farm things like almonds that have a very high water usage. So again, you know, the anti-development laws make land expensive in New Jersey, but they do serve some purpose. Okay. I don't see any questions here. So I want to look at one thing. We had 42 people left on class tonight. Congratulations to all of you. You all deserve to pass your test, because sticking out this class tonight for all this time, congratulations to all of you. Good job. All right. And I'll bring back the slide about signing out. So give me a minute here. Which I actually have to do by going this way, because Zoom does not allow me to minimize in order to move quickly, but that's okay. And I am recording this. It's over a 2-hour class, so it will take me a while to process it. Zoom itself takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then YouTube takes a couple hours. So if I'm lucky, I'll get this out tomorrow. We did not do wills and dissent tonight. I did what you guys asked for tonight, which I never mind doing it that way. It's no big deal. Oh, where are we? Here we go. So to sign out, you want to email my wife, ljbparker@msn.com. She's in the office. You know, we're still not going into the office because of Corona, but she'll go in on Tuesdays to sign people out, unless it's an emergency, unless you have to, for some reason, get signed out real quick because something's going on. The question is, what do I mean by signing out? When you've had your hours, and 75 hours, you have to have 80% of that, which is 60 hours. we're giving you credit from 6 to 9:30 every time you're in class. So if you take that 6 to 9:30 and multiply it by how many times you're in class, when you get up to 60 hours, you're eligible to be signed out. When I sign you out, you're eligible to take the test. There's a couple of ramifications for being signed out. One is when I sign you out, you have 1 year from the day I sign you out to pass your test, get fingerprinted, and hang your license. So you want to make sure that you've got all your hours in. You want to make sure that you're ready, and you don't want to postpone taking your test because this stuff leaks out of your head. We do, as long as we're on Zoom, we do allow you to come back to class anytime during the year you want for a refresher. You know, if you procrastinate and you don't take the test right away, you're going to need to come back to class to pass. So you're welcome to come back as long as we're not in the physical location. If we are in the physical location, you can come back as long as there's a seat. We just don't want you taking somebody's seat to come back for a refresher if there's not enough seats. And you know, we only could seat 20 people in the class at a time. So I'm very grateful for Zoom. How do I apply to take the test online? So after I sign you out, the information that's required for me to tell them about you, your name, your email, and your birth date, you will then go the next day, because they don't process the information quickly enough. The next day, you'll go on to their site and you'll register to take the test with PSI. A couple of people in class tried to take it at home because they do have a way that you can take it at home. There's too many glitches. I would not do that. I would go take it at the test center. There's 2 of them in North Brunswick. You can get a time almost any time you want. So after I sign you out, that's when the next day, you go to PSI and you schedule to take the test online. Somebody asked, how many times can you take it? You can take it 180 times. And that's a joke, but you can, because you can take it every other day. You can't take it every day because, like I said before, it takes time for PSI to process the information. So if you fail today, you can't take it again until Friday. Today's Wednesday. You can't take it again until Friday. But I don't want you to fail. Right. Every time you're going to pay the fee again. I don't want you to fail. I want you to pass the darn test. Besides, I don't want you to spend the money. Besides that, I get graded. So if you fail, I get a letter from the real estate commission asking what's going on. And so I want you to get good scores and pass, and I want you to pass anyway, and I want you to do real estate and start making some money. I absolutely love real estate, and I think you guys are going to find you like it also. Don't quit your day job. That's what I tell everybody. It takes 2 years to really get a career going, to really become a top agent. It takes, just like anything else, to become an expert in anything, it takes 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours is 5 years full time. And I got that from Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book. And I also got it from an old German saying, which is, it takes 5 years to earn your desk. And that means if you get a job, it takes you 5 years to become an expert in it. So we want you to get your license, and we want you to get up to speed quickly and make some money and sell all my listings or come to work with me. Either one is fine for me. And I think you're gonna enjoy it. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. Thank you, and watch for invitations for tomorrow and Friday. Can't promise yet until I see what's going on tomorrow with the board meeting.